In this movie, we're going to talk about digital signatures. There's two ways to have a digital signature that's not certified, where it can be either invisible or visible. And lastly, there's a way to have a third party certify and validate your signature. So why would you want to have a digital signature? There's two basic functionalities that a digital signature serves. One is to verify the source, the author that created the workbook. And the other is to confirm to the author that the workbook hasn't been changed. And those two pieces of information are important because the way a virus is passed around many times is by a macro that's attached to a workbook or a document. And if you use macros in your organization, or if you have macros in your workbook, it can provide the recipient some comfort to see that it's been digitally signed, and further, that it may contain a verified digital signature. So how do you sign a document? We're going to begin by looking at the free way to do it. And the first thing you have to do is install this functionality from the Microsoft Office tools by going to the Start menu, left-clicking All Programs, going to Microsoft Office, Microsoft Office 2010 Tools, and then left-clicking Digital Certificate for VBA Projects. I'm going to left-click that. And the description is that the program creates a self-signed digital certificate that bears the name you type below. This type of certificate does not verify your identity. And so you might ask, what good is it? And the answer to that is, at the end of the day, not very. Maybe it's better than nothing. I'm going to put my name in here and then left-click OK. I get some feedback from Excel telling me the self-cert is a success. I've created a new certificate for myself. Left-clicking OK. So I've now created the ability for me to add a digital signature to this workbook. But the way you actually add a digital signature is to go Backstage to the File, Info, left-click Protect Workbook, and at the bottom, left-click Add a Digital Signature. I get a message from Excel telling me that I'm better off to get a third-party digital signature service provider to verify my signature than doing it the way I'm currently doing it, but we're not going to do that quite yet. I'm going to left-click OK, and Excel tells me I'm about to add a digital signature to the document. The signature will not be visible within the content of the document. And I can either use my signature as I just created it a minute ago, or I can put a new signature in here. I'm going to left-click Sign, and Excel confirms that my signature has been successfully saved with the document. If the document is changed, your signature will become invalid. I'm going to left-click OK and acknowledge that. So Backstage on the Info tab, I get some instant feedback that tells me that the workbook is signed. And in the Permissions group, the workbook has been marked as final to discourage editing. Going back inside the workbook, I see the marked as final notification again. An author has marked the workbook as final to discourage editing. Right next to that, it says Edit Anyway, so it doesn't prevent somebody from doing any editing. It just sort of discourages them, hopefully. By the way, the workbook is saved automatically when you sign the workbook. So I've created an invisible signature in this document. The only way somebody's aware that there's a signature is to go back to the Backstage area, and in View Signatures, I can pull up the Signatures pane, which lists the signatures that are associated with this document. I'm going to close that. And when somebody clicks Edit Anyway, a couple of things happen. This workbook is currently in read-only mode. It'll come out of read-only mode. The signature will be removed from this workbook, and it will no longer be marked as final. So I'm going to click Edit Anyway. Excel tells me that the editing will remove the signatures in the workbook. Do I want to continue? Yes. And just like when we signed the workbook and it was automatically saved, when we remove the signature, the workbook is also automatically saved. I'm going to acknowledge that. And now we're back to our regular looking workbook. And Backstage, it looks the same as well. To add a visible digital signature, go back to the workbook, left-click Insert. In the text group, left-click Signature Line drop-down, and then left-click Microsoft Office Signature Line. Again, I get the message from Excel telling me I would be better off going to a third party to verify my signature, which again, we're not going to do. I'm going to left click OK. And Excel then presents me with a signature setup dialog box where I can put my name, my title, and my email address, which I'm going to skip. And there's a little blurb about the instructions to the signer. Before signing the document, verify that the content you are signing is correct. Otherwise, you're really not verifying anything. And then at the bottom, we have the option to show signed date in the signature line, which infers that we're going to get a signature line when I left click OK. So I've inserted my signature line, which I then double click on. And again, Excel reminds me again that I should be using a third-party signature service provider, which we're still not going to do. And now I can sign the workbook, left click sign. I get a confirmation that my signature has been successfully saved. If the document is changed, my signature will become invalid. I'm going to acknowledge that. And our workbook looks the same as it did before, except we have a visible signature, of course. When I signed it, the workbook was automatically saved. I get a marked as final notification. Backstage, the evidence shows that the workbook is signed, and the permission level is set so that the workbook has been marked as final to discourage editing. Back in the workbook, I can left-click Edit Anyway as I could before. Editing will remove the signatures in the workbook. Yes, the signature has been removed and the document has been saved. Again, every time you sign it or you remove a signature, the document's saved automatically. Left-click OK. And even though I've removed the signature from the workbook, it still is displayed on the worksheet. Maybe that's a bit of confusing functionality, but nonetheless, that's the case. Even if I go and double-click it, it still doesn't give me the option to re-sign it. So the best thing to do, I would think, is to delete that completely. So the third way to sign a document is the way that Excel keeps trying to get us to use, and that is to purchase the services of a third-party provider that for an annual fee of somewhere between $100 and $500, they will validate your signatures in your documents, including workbooks. So if we go to Insert, Signature Line, and Add Signature Services, we'll be taken online where we get some information about how we go about doing this and some links to the third-party service providers. This, at the end of the day, is really the only way to verify and validate your signature. So we talked about worksheet or workbook protection and digital signatures, where we could have an invisible, unverified digital signature in a workbook that will cause the permission level of the workbook to be set to marked as final to discourage editing. We can have a visible unverified signature that will again mark the workbook as final. And lastly, we can engage the services of a third-party provider that will allow us to verify and validate our signatures.